Live from across America and around the world, it's the Voice of Reason. If you're tired of people telling you what the Bible says, wouldn't you like to know what it means? Lighthouse World Ministries presents A Voice of Reason with your host, John Anderson. Join John and his guest as they will bring the scriptures alive. Come, let us reason together. And now, your host, John Anderson.
Welcome back to the Voice of Reason. I'm John Anderson, your host. Always a pleasure to be here with you on this Sunday evening. I get a thrill each week when I hear from people that have said they just tuned in to a particular station and they caught the program, or they send me an email, because they're finding that the issues that we deal with, and basically I use this analogy probably several months ago, that there's a three-legged stool that we need to address. Certainly, the issue of theology and eschatology from a Christian perspective, it's in serious trouble, folks. Also, the economic situation that we have, the monetary system that we have, this debt monetary system, is killing the nation and the people financially. And we also have the third leg, which is the political. They're all tied together, folks. I didn't realize how close I was to understanding that when I first made the comment, because to me it seems that those three legs of the stool are very, very important. We live in an interesting nation and an interesting time, and a gentleman that I enjoy having on but every 6 weeks or so, because I think he's got a message out there that people need to hear. Former presidential candidate and ambassador, Alan Keyes. Alan, welcome back. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing pretty well. How are you, John?
Well, I'm doing good. I just, was recently informed here last week to find out that because you are a birther, you are basically an anarchist. And I went, gee, I guess I'm an anarchist too, because
where on earth did you find that out? That's quite a discovery.
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, no more impressive an authority. My goodness. So
yeah. I'm sure his programs are archived, or the clips or whatever. Somebody, I'm sure, will get that one out.
Right.
Because it's amazing to me. Since when, Alan Keyes, straightforward, right up the cuff, and we only have a couple of minutes before our first break, but since when did asking questions about people in our government period makes you an anarchist?
I really don't know, especially since the questions have to do with making sure that the supreme law of the land is respected. So if you want to see the Constitution respected, which is the supreme law on the basis of which all the other laws gain their authority, then you're an anarchist? That's amazing.
Yeah, I did a double take.
The people who want to take the Constitution and throw it away, since it is the foundation of our laws and the foundation of the legitimacy of our government, the ones who want to destroy it are the ones who are showing respect for law. What kind of a time do we live in? This is really crazy.
That's why I said, Alan, these are some interesting times that we're living in, my friend. I am amazed that, and I even talked about this once before, but it's been a while. John McCain had to pull out a birth certificate showing that he was a citizen of the United States to run as a presidential candidate. But because you and a lot of other people out there are asking, why didn't Mr. Barack Obama do the same thing? It's almost like you have become completely crazy to even suggest the fact that he should actually produce a birth certificate like you and I or anyone else born in this country could do, Alan. And we're coming up to a break. I'm going to get you a comment. We're not going to belabor it, but I want you to comment on that when we come back. I'm John Anderson.
Okay.
This is The Voice of Reason. Alan Keyes, my special guest. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Voice of Reason. I'm John Anderson, your host. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Sunday evening. One of my favorite anarchists out there, Alan Keyes, has joined us this evening. You might think, what are you talking about, John? Well, if you watch Glenn Beck, you know. Alan's picture was up there on the famous blackboard that's now being used on a regular basis, along with Deborah Medina. By the way, she was moved down to the norm, even though he questioned the fact that she wouldn't answer about being a truther about 9/11. So, Alan, since when did it become this way in our world, our country, the land of the free and the home of the brave, Alan?
The attitude, John, I think it only becomes that way depending on how seriously you take the kind of media puppets and sham artists that are out there, and I don't take them seriously. I guess that's why I wasn't aware of all of this nonsense, because it is just that. I don't care for them anymore, don't watch them, and don't care what they say. And there's not a single one of them who I do not believe is, at the end of the day, just a Judas goat, intended to get people to believe them for a while so that they can then lead them into the slaughter pen that serve the purposes of this sham two-party system that is actually masking the effort to take over our country completely and consolidate power in the hands of people who owe no allegiance to the Constitution, care not about the American people, want to see the end of the American nation and the establishment of kind of institutions at a internationalist and global level that take no account of the basic values of justice that our society is based on. So I don't really spend much time thinking about them. And I've heard a bit about the kinds of things that Glenn Beck has said, and certainly he has tried to show his sympathies with the Tea Party movement and so forth. But he's one of these folks who deals in the great one-liners and so forth and so on. But I wrote a couple of columns about what he had said about people who are asking that the president prove his credentials so that the Constitution can be respected, and there were no arguments involved. He just basically calls people names and stuff. And that's a standard tactic of the left. I encountered it over the course of many years, because when they lack substance, as they so often do, they then try to somehow intimidate you with name-calling and ridicule. It's a sign of intellectual bankruptcy. It's a sign that, in point of fact, you can make no argument that holds water, and that when that point is reached, you must serve the purposes of power by trying to bludgeon people. It's basically the intellectual and verbal equivalent of the use of force in order to get your way. And he probably figures he's got a big enough platform that if he slanders people, it's going to do them damage, so he does. I think it's irresponsible, but I'm not going to stay awake worrying about it.
No, I didn't figure you would, Alan, but I just found it amazing, really, because, like I said, I did a double take when I heard that. I said, you've got to be kidding me, because that makes me a anarchist also. I'd like to know that we have a man that's president, elected president, can actually run for president.
Judging by the response that has been increasing around the country, I think the last thing that I saw, 50% of the folks in the country, in these polls that they do, now basically take the common sense position that he should satisfy the requirements of the Constitution, show the birth certificate, get it over with. That doesn't mean, by the way, and I've said this about myself, I say it about others, that doesn't mean that they're asserting that he's not a natural-born citizen. Some people have made that assertion. I have not, because I figure, how can I be making assertions in the absence of evidence?
Well, that's the whole point.
I try not to do this.
Produce a birth certificate, case closed.
Right, exactly. But you do have to wonder, and I'm sure many people in the country have been wondering for many months now, why it is that you would go out of your way to take the trouble to prevent people from looking at the evidence if everything is kosher. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's quite easily resolved. And the fact that we not only have Obama, but so many elements of the elected politicians, the courts, all of these people, I am reminded, John, and I remind people in my talks and speeches now, of the fact that when the country was founded, the people in the founding generation, notably people like Hamilton at the Constitutional Convention and others, pointed out that when you establish a government that's based on the participation and ultimately, of course, the consent of the people, right? The people who, down through the ages, have been able to garner power to themselves without regard for the consent of the people. The nobility, as they were called, the aristocrats, the oligarchs, what we would call the elites, right? These people are constrained. They're put under constraint so that it is no longer the case that just because of their claims to superiority, they can run roughshod over the rights and property and lives of other people. And it was predicted by the founders that such people would be impatient with these constraints, would be constantly working to overturn the Constitution that imposed the constraints, and that therefore you had to make provisions so that the people could defend themselves against these encroachments. So I think what explains this whole business in our time is that our elites are fulfilling the expectations of the founders of the United States. They have grown increasingly impatient with the constraints that the Constitution imposes upon them. You'll notice that for decades they tried to use the courts and have successfully used the courts to impose their narrow little views on the majority of the people. It's happened with abortion, it's happening with marriage and other things, where they come along and say, we want it this way, and then they use the courts to go against the values and beliefs and underlying common sense of the mass of the people in order to impose their viewpoint. That's what the judicial tyranny has really been all about. But I think we've now reached a stage where folks have been reacting against that. It's becoming increasingly difficult for them to get away with it, and so they're trying to subvert the constitutional structure itself, throw off these shackles so that they will no longer really have to pay attention to what the people think. Consent will be out the window. And I think we've seen the indications of this in the way that they responded when people raised questions about the health care bill at the town meetings around the country. The incredible arrogance with which a lot of these politicos responded was characteristic of the mentality of arrogant elites who basically take a how dare you challenge me attitude toward the mass of the people.
And that's certainly not the attitude that this country was founded on. I want to move to something else. You know, last year, vice presidential candidate on the Republican side, Sarah Palin, seemed to be this breath of fresh air that came in. And, wow, here's a conservative that people can relate to. She talks like the rest of us. And now it seems that, and people that I've spoken with, certainly people on the news, and yourself, Alan, wondering just how conservative is Sarah Palin? Because when she's out campaigning for John McCain, who is an absolute progressive, what's happening?
Well, as you probably know, John, I always had, shall we call them at first reservations, and then misgivings, and then doubt. And then finally, I guess I've been setting pretty clear conclusions to the effect that I don't believe that Sarah Palin represents the kind of conservatism that will really restore respect for the Constitution, restore respect for unalienable rights, and basically restore the foundations of liberty in this country. I think there are things on which she sounds very good. And then there are other fundamental things. When you look at what she did as Alaska governor, when you look at the arguments that she's willing to accept when it comes to the pro-life position, where it's as if the basic premises, the basic principles of justice are not being respected and understood and applied. And I think that's particularly true. I've written several things on my blog talking about the stand that she takes on the issue of respect for the life of the unborn. And, of course, she earned a lot of respect and support from people because of her decision to raise her Down syndrome child, a very moving and sincere story. But as I've often said to people, I am absolutely convinced that Sarah Palin is authentically, sincerely, personally pro-life, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to public policy, she has, first of all, taken a position in general that is like Ron Paul's, like Scott Brown's and other people, where they say, well, that should be a decision for the state legislatures, right? And I'm trying to get my mind around the fact that the pro-life position is based on the idea that our rights come from God, yes? And that since the rights come from God, human choice cannot withdraw those rights from the child in the womb. Now, the purpose of government, according to the Declaration of Independence, is to secure unalienable rights, the first of which is the right to life. So will somebody tell me how a state government comes by the power to make the decision to permit the child in the womb to be killed? The state government can't have that prerogative any more than the national government, because either way, it violates, first, the will of God in the endowment with unalienable rights, and second, the purpose of just government. which is to secure unalienable rights, not to take them away from a whole class, in this case of helpless innocents, who represent the future of the society. It makes no sense. And so to take a position like that means you don't really understand the basis of the pro-life position. You're sort of tossing the logic of it aside, and fine, acting on what may be at a personal level your instincts, but then when it comes to making the argument, you're setting the pro-life movement up for defeat. Because the response to the notion that the state legislature should make the decision is, why would the state legislature have any better right to make that decision than the woman, who is, after all, intimately involved and who stands before God responsible for what she does with herself as well as the life entrusted to her care. So in the first instance, unless you've got an argument that trumps it, my view always is individual rights come first, because that's what our government is supposed to be about protecting. And in this case, it would be the woman as an individual that you'd look at first. And if we have an argument that says take her right away, how can you hand it to the state government? It doesn't make any sense.
I'm John Anderson. This is The Voice of Reason. If you got a question or comment, if you'd like to jump in, the number's toll free, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. I'm John Anderson. This is The Voice of Reason. Alan Keyes and I will return right after this. Welcome back to The Voice of Reason. I'm John Anderson, your host. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Sunday evening. Remember, hey, if you happen to be on the internet, listen to the broadcast, go to ReadyReserveFoods.com. That's ReadyReserveFoods.com. Check out what they have. I've been telling you about them for some time. And by the way, if you want to get a catalog, if you're not too hot to trot about the internet, great. Pick up the phone. It's a toll-free number, 800-453-2202. 800-453-2202. That's ReadyReserveFoods.com. Simple, folks, with all the things that have been going on in this country this winter, wouldn't it be nice to know that you got food no matter what, and it will last, and you can get it at a very, very economical price. ReadyReserveFoods.com or 800-453-2202. Alan, before we continue, please let people know how to get a hold of you.
Well, the best way to reach me and share my thoughts these days is to go to loyaltoliberty.com, loyaltoliberty.com or alankeyes.com, either one. And you can find there all the information about how to get in touch with me. We're even putting up things now so that people know where to get in touch with the lady who works my schedule in case they want me to come speak to groups and things like that, which up until this point we hadn't been doing. But I think the website is becoming now a good center for people to both access some of the thinking that I'm doing and be able to stay in touch. They can also reach me, of course, by email at alan@alankeyes.com. Very easy to remember. alan@alankeyes.com.
All right. And one of the things, I want to talk about several issues with you this evening, Alan, because I think a lot of things the media hits at, but no one really takes it. I'll say one thing for Glenn Beck. He has exposed a lot of things out there and educated people, the general masses, quote, in a way that a lot of us have been looking at for a long time. So like it's no big news. We've been knowing about it, but now finally it's hitting out in the mainstream arena somewhat. One of the issues, Alan, is the Federal Reserve, as you well know. This incredible tax that people have, et cetera, and so on. A gentleman that I have on this program periodically, his name is Byron Dale, and I wanted you guys to meet Alan because I believe that Alan has an answer that no one else out there is really pushing at this point, that maybe you guys can get together on this, because let's face it, you both understand this Federal Reserve is a real problem. And Alan, I want to introduce you to Byron Dale. Byron Dale, Alan Keyes. How you doing?
Great, and good to meet you, Alan.
Good to meet you, Byron. Pleasure indeed.
I've seen you a few times in person when you've been at different places, but I've never had an opportunity to speak to you before. It's a pleasure.
I'm glad we can get together. Appreciate it.
What I'm trying to do, Alan, is I want you and Byron, he has a website called wealthmoney.org. He's written an excellent book. He has a system, and I'm going to give him just a couple of minutes with you on this, that can actually pull our country from a debt monetary system to a wealth monetary system, and no one out there really in the main media even wants to hear about it. Alan, if you wouldn't mind for just a minute, Byron, if you would, take this couple of minutes and kind of share with them, and we'll carry it over a little bit beyond the break, okay?
Sure. It's just a simple thing because I don't believe a man can borrow himself out of debt. I don't think a government can, or a city, or anybody else. So at this point in time, all we have money that's created as the bank as an interest-bearing loan. So there is no money unless somebody borrows it. So there's no way to get out of debt. You can shift the debt on to the next generation, but you can't get out of it. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we could solve that problem and how we could create money as an asset rather than a debt. And, of course, that's what gold and silver was. If under the 1792 Coinage Act, if you dug it out of the ground and took it to the United States Mint and had it stamped into coins, it was wealth money based upon your production. The trouble of it is there's simply not enough of that to make a good general medium exchange. So how do we work one? And I've spent lots of time thinking about that, and I've come up with a couple unique ideas. And one of them is a simple idea that we could start through the states, through the state banking system that the states control. Mm-hmm. And it will work like a charm, and we've got a bill in the Minnesota House Legislature, and there's a lot of interest, but it's just been hard to get very many people to pick up on the subject and really address it.
And that's why, Alan, I wanted you as a national person out there that is dealing with these issues, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we come back, to see, here's something that I'm convinced, and a lot of other people are, that could fix what's happening. Nobody else is bringing it up. I'm John Anderson. This is The Voice of Reason. Alan Keyes is my guest, and Byron Dale has joined us. We're going to continue to come back. Welcome back to The Voice of Reason. I'm John Anderson, your host. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Sunday evening, coming to you live across America and around the world. Alan Keyes is my special guest on this hour, and Byron Dale, who is the author of Modern Money Secrets, and his website is wealthmoney.org, are talking with us. And Byron, if you would, kind of get into the basics here. It takes you a couple of 3 minutes, and I know that's not a lot of time, but I'm trying to get a lot accomplished tonight, and just kind of share with Alan and our audience, as you have done before, where we can start and go with this.
Well, Alan, we have to put some money into circulation without debt, or you can't get rid of any debt, no matter what you do, except, just forgive it, but people still got to have a money system. Even if you're doing that, they got to still buy and sell. So most people don't understand that we have a dual banking system in the United States, a federally chartered and a state chartered. And the state chartered one is totally controlled by the state legislature. And, of course, nowadays with all these states having such terrible deficits, they're getting more interested. But what it is, we would simply pass a law in the state of Minnesota, where I live, and have the state banks create money just like they do now, except spend it into circulation to rebuild our infrastructure instead of loan it in at interest. It's really that simple. Now the money's created just like it is today. It's created as numbers and put into a checking account only in a way that benefits the people and also allows them to get paid for building the roads that benefits everybody. Then I don't know about where you live, but, man, here there's potholes you can't hardly drive anymore. Do you have any questions?
So when you say create, you mean create accounts in the state bank?
Yes. And it will be the same money we use right now, just checkbook money that we write checks on and move the money in from one bank to the other anytime we want, but it'll represent wealth instead of debt.
And those would be dollar-denominated accounts? Or how?
Oh, yeah, just like they are now. They're dollar-denominated checking accounts. And, of course, all we actually use for money now is numbers. And the state banks have the power to create, or the ability, I should say, to create those numbers and put them into the system, but as a payment rather than a more interest-bearing debt.
Well, I have a question for you, though, because,
sure.
This differs from the old days when governments, of course, in our case, national level, other countries around the world at the national level, and the time of the colonial period in America, it was at the state level where they just print money. The states would print money and basically put it in circulation in the state. But of course, that actual practice on the part of the state government is forbidden by the Constitution.
Well, no, it's not, because if it was, we wouldn't be doing it right now. See,
no.
the states...
The state of Minnesota cannot put out a Minnesota dollar.
Well, we're not putting out Minnesota dollars.
Right. That's the only question I'm asking. It's basically an account that's denominated. But a question that is being raised, and is always in the back of my mind, though, is what backs up those dollars? However,
well, the actual production of the people do. The actual transportation that you drive on. That everybody gets benefit on. You can do business without money because you could barter, but you can't do business without a transportation system. It's the most important thing, and we got this out of the United States Constitution where it says Congress should coin the money and provide for post offices and post roads. So if they created the money and spent it into circulation as a payment to build the roads, you'd have the perfect situation.
The problem, I guess, is, and it's a problem I've had with the present system, okay, even when the Federal Reserve was started out, what was handed around was not just a piece of paper with some junk written on it. It was a piece of paper that was known as a silver certificate. That was the basic dollar. And it was basically represented a promise that if you took that silver certificate in, you would be able to get silver in exchange for it.
Yeah, and this is the exact same principle, exactly the same thing.
Wait. It was a currency that was backed by species that you could actually hold, and the value of that species then tied to the actual state of the economy. That's
exactly what we're talking about, only you're using something that the people really need, and there's enough of it to make it work. There never was enough gold and silver to make it work, and never has been. It isn't now. So you can't go to a system that physically cannot be worked.
Well, no. The point I'm making, however, is I'm not quite sure, though, how, when you say it is backed, say, by the transportation, what do you mean?
Well, because it's just exactly the exact same thing as a silver certificate. It said that you can go get the actual, wealth that was produced from the ground. Well, this simply says basically the same thing. It wouldn't be in writing, but it would be the same thing, that now you could drive on the roads anytime and any place you wanted to without taxation.
Well, no, but it's not quite the same thing. Because
it's exactly the same thing.
Wait. I could put my silver to private use.
Well, but you can't, if there's no silver there to get, you can't.
Well, no, the silver certificate would be denominated in silver according to a value for that silver determined by the state of your economy.
Yeah, but if there's not enough silver
it didn't have to be enough, because the whole point is that to the extent that productivity slows down, to the extent that it speeds up, that is going to be reflected in the amount of silver that you get for that dollar, and what that silver can buy on the market. So the point was that the state of the economy was going to be reflected in what market basket of goods and services a given amount of gold or silver could buy. If you were inflating things, it was going to be reflected in the change in the market basket of goods that you could buy for that silver or gold. I don't see how I can spend the transportation system in the supermarket.
Well, you can spend the benefit of it. You can spend the right to use it in the marketplace.
Yeah, but I think it's in other words, infrastructure. To be frank about it, is a kind of immobile real estate that essentially is a public good, and
that's a lot more than silver is.
Well, no, that's not true.
That is true.
The advantage. No, silver has the advantage of being subject to private ownership, not just private use.
Okay, but now if that worked so well, why didn't the Founding Fathers do it in the very first place? They never did do it.
The Founding Fathers lived in a world in which nothing else was done. It required the 20th century and the invention of the kind of system we have under the Federal Reserve to move away from what had been the habit of mankind, which was essentially species-based currency.
Well, that's not true, because the first thing the Founding Fathers did was start a central bank and use the other kind of money. That's historically proven.
The first thing the Founding Fathers did, the money was always, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. Go back and look at the dollars they put out. Those were not like Federal Reserve dollars. Federal Reserve dollars are backed by nothing.
Well, no, they're backed by the real wealth of the people. They're backed by the mortgages on all the homes and everything.
It's not backed by the real wealth of the people. In the case of the Federal Reserve, it's backed up by fiction created through the banking system. And to the extent that you can convince people to go on believing in the shell game, it holds up for a while, the way a con does or a Ponzi scheme. But once people realize what's going on, it starts to collapse. The same was not true of species-denominated systems because there was always a concrete value to the gold in your hands that would be proven out in private exchanges. And so you always were holding on to a certain amount of value when you had that in your coffin. And it's true of certain other commodities as well, but gold and silver proved to be the ones that were most usable and exchangeable for this purpose throughout the world.
Well, that simply is not a true statement.
I'm sorry, but
it isn't. Study your history.
As the productivity of the economies around the world is threatened, the price of gold goes up, meaning to say the value of gold once again reflects that fact. It is something that was true pretty much throughout human history, and it caused empires to rise and fall, including the Spanish Empire, which fell precisely over time, precisely because they did not understand and manage the consequences of their own acquisition of gold and the effect it have on their economy.
The thing basically that I wanted to accomplish was the problem with the interest at the Federal Reserve level is crippling our nation, coupled with the debt that we all have, whether you're paying a mortgage or whatever else. The interest, we're creating such a debt, it can never, ever be paid, is really the bottom line. What I just basically want to do is introduce you guys, because when I first, it took me a while to see what Byron was doing, because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so to speak. What I want you to do is, if you guys could exchange some emails and look at his website, maybe get a copy of his book. I would encourage Byron to send you one, because all of a sudden, when we take this interest out from the Federal Reserve, suddenly we're dealing now with an amount that is not growing in debt, but it is actually would be in a position to put wealth into people instead of everybody. I guess our collective.
See, but this is part of the question I'm raising. I guess I think that the only way that you increase wealth is by increasing wealth.
Well, the only way you can create wealth is to combine knowledge, labor, and raw resources at the exact same moment in time. That's the only way you can create anything.
That's the only way that you create wealth, where you have people who, through the application of their intelligence and using both the human and material resources that are available, they are producing things that then have, for other human beings and for themselves, a value in exchange and use.
We absolutely agree on that.
That's the whole point, Alan.
But,
all right. Hallelujah.
Let me say what the prerequisite. The prerequisite in my mind, the thing that I am always worrying about in the back of my mind is that wealth must be privately ownable, right? And if you have a medium of exchange, it must reflect that private ownership. And the problem I have with the existing money system is that it is essentially a system that pretends we still have private ownership when all we've got is public money. Money, the value of which is entirely created by public fiat, by the fiat of government. That actually extinguishes private property.
Absolutely, but it's the debt on it that extinguishes the private property, not the form of the money.
No, actually, it's the nature of the money itself.
And the nature of the money is its interest-bearing debt.
No, the nature of the money is that the creation of the value of that money is entirely in the hands of government. When in point of fact, the very essence of private property is to understand that it is ownable by individuals. It is not a public possession. And that's where I'm raising the question, because it seems to me that in a very important respect, infrastructure is not divisible amongst individuals.
This is only a starting point, Alan, and actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Byron to send you a copy of his book. He can get the address here from your website, and I want you to take a look at it, because the idea of the infrastructure is important. You're right. we can't put it in our pocket, but we all use that together to be able to carry on our additional work. We could actually own it instead of someone else owning it, and we pay for it and still.
Yeah, but I can't own it. That's my problem. I believe that the mainstay of successful economic life, and the one that respects the principle of justice in this country, which is individual rights and responsibility, okay, is that individual.
I guarantee you'll get it this way, but I'll tell you what, Alan, I'll send you the book free of charge if you'll promise me and in front of John and the world that you will read it thoroughly and wholly and not just scan through it.
Absolutely, I will.
All right.
Okay.
I'm very
Fantastic.
I am very interested and excited by ideas that will help us to somehow overcome the monstrosity that was created in the 20th century in the Federal Reserve System.
Well,
Maybe,
I spent 28 years of my life working just on that problem alone. How do you actually solve the problem of what's happening to us?
Please don't take my preliminary questions. There's any indication that I'm not going to look at and take this very seriously, because I will. And I just have the bad habit of always kind of examining things.
Well, I think you should. My gosh, you wouldn't be worth anything if you didn't.
You see, this is the thing. Alan, you are very much trying to get people to adhere to our Constitution, get us back to where it makes some sense. Byron is doing the same thing, but from a whole different perspective, and it really deals with our whole monetary system. And I wanted you guys to meet. I've got some more questions, Alan, I want to ask you and deal with other areas. Byron, I appreciate you taking the time to be with me, and I wanted you guys to
Byron,
meet.
I would like to add one thing. I promised to read it, and then I hope we'd be able to get back together on the program here and chat about it.
Oh, I'd love it.
Be good.
All right. Byron, thank you so much, my friend.
You betcha. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
Alan, we come to another issue in right now. Iran. There's running it on news right now. Is in a process, they're saying the IEA says, hey, they're making a nuclear bomb. This is a scary scenario, Alan.
Well, I think it certainly is. And I think it's scary because the Iranians have played such a well-known, confirmed, and prominent role in the terrorist infrastructure in the Middle East, but also in other parts of the world. And given that prominent role, if they do develop a nuclear weapons making capability, I don't see how we could make any assumption except that they would then make use of it in order to provide elements of this terrorist infrastructure with these weapons of mass destruction. And that would, I think, be a grave threat, not only to people in their own region, but given the experiences we've had with this infrastructure to cities and people here in the United States. I think it's an intolerable threat.
It's something that I'm convinced, Alan, I don't know about you at this point, but I'm convinced it's going to come to a head before too long. Israel has already stated they're not going to allow this to happen. We now have other people. North Korea says, hey, guess what? You know, our nuclear program, we're going to keep going. There's a lot of instability.
There is, and one of the things, and maybe you could help me understand it, so I don't understand why it is, or maybe I do in a kind of very negative way, but that this so-called administration with Obama is making noises as if to say to the Israelis, don't you dare do anything to stop this development, or we will somehow turn against you and punish you. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what earthly sense does that make? It's insane.
There's a lot of questions out there that a lot of people are saying, you know, we need some answers. It's one of the things we're trying to provide here. Al, we're going to come back and wrap this hour up in just a minute. Sure enjoy having you on the broadcast. I'm John Anderson. This is The Voice of Reason. Alan Keyes is my guest. We're going to wrap it up and we'll come back. See you then. Welcome back to The Voice of Reason. I'm John Anderson, your host. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Sunday evening. My guest on this hour, Alan Keyes. And folks, remember, if you haven't gone to ReadyReserveFoods.com yet, make it a point to do so. Check it out. They have some great prices. Why? Because David is the manufacturer and he passes that onto you, no middleman. ReadyReserveFoods.com, or give them a call. He'll send you a catalog. 800-453-2202. Okay? Don't get caught at home without it. Okay? I believe that. I thought it was going to be good. Alan, if you would, once again, let people know how to get a hold of you, sir.
Well, they can reach me by going to my website, loyaltoliberty.com. They can also reach it at alankeyes.com, ALANKEYES.com. Goes to the same place. And you can reach me by email if you would like to do it that way, at alan@alankeyes.com. Again, if you can kind of remember my name, you can remember how to get in touch with me.
That's an easy one.
And I'd sure be happy if folks would mention that they, got introduced to me on your program, because that would be nice to know. But I'd love to hear from them.
Hey, folks, you heard him. Send him an email. Tell him, hey, thanks for coming on the broadcast, and keep up the good work. Keep pushing for the Constitution. You never know who's listening to this program, Alan. We've got Jim in Texas. Jim, how you doing?
Hi. Given that they were just talking about the Federal Reserve System, given the politicians' fear to talk about that issue, it's not surprising that they're afraid to talk about the birth certificate issue. But why do you think it is that they are so deathly afraid of asking for just proof of the Constitution's requirement of eligibility for office?
Well, I'm not sure myself that it's fear. I think that it's actually intention, and I have so argued. I think that there are people who consciously want to devalue the authority of the Constitution so that it won't stand in the way of their projects. Some of them are involved in projects that have to do with their international profits and greed motive, like the ones who want to destroy our border sovereignty and introduce millions of illegal immigrants into the country, and so forth. Others have their schemes of socialism that they would like to impose, where the Constitution, being grounded as it is, in a consent that comes from individuals and is therefore based upon respect to individual rights, that's going to stand in the way of this collectivized approach to economic and social life that puts power in the hands of parties. So I think they just see the Constitution as an obstacle, and that they would like to erode its authority. And, of course, putting somebody in the White House in contravention of a clear, plain provision of the Constitution greatly devalues its authority.
Yes, it does.
Jim, I appreciate you calling in, my friend. Of course, you guys know each other quite well. Jim Phillips, Alan Keyes.
That's Jim Phillips, I think, right?
Yes. Jim is a frequent guest on my program.
So we know each other very well. We've worked together for many years.
Thank you for standing up for the truth, Alan. Thank you, John, for having him on. Bye-bye.
Oh, and Jim,
yes?
not Jim, John, by the way, if folks would like to reach me by regular mail, I always forget to do that. It's P.O. Box 83759. P.O. Box 83759, Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20883.
All right. Listen, Jim, we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for calling, my friend. Alan, there's a lot of people out here that listen to this broadcast. I'm going to encourage them to send you an email, tell them how much you appreciate your willingness to stand up for the Constitution. We'll look forward to having you back. Keep pumping, Alan. I'm John Anderson. This is the Voice of Reason. Coming back, hour number 3, right after this.